Have you ever wondered what lies beneath your thoughts, what stirs behind your emotions, or what silent orchestra conducts every blink, every memory, every decision you've ever made? Today, I will tell you the story of the human brain, the mysterious engine of your mind and the timeless epicenter of your being. Before we begin unraveling the profound secrets of your own consciousness, don't forget to like, share, and support this journey into the deepest chamber of your inner universe. What awaits is not simply knowledge, but an awakening. It begins, not with thought, but with structure, an elegant tangle of cells born from embryonic sparks, woven into a cathedral of billions of neurons and trillions of connections. The human brain, weighing scarcely 3 pounds, houses the essence of identity, behavior, and imagination. Encased in bone, floating in cerebrospinal fluid, it is both fortress and fire, both command and chaos. It does not see, yet interprets light. It does not hear, yet decodes music. It does not feel the world, yet it lives as the translator of every sensation. Within the skull, it resembles a folded landscape, its hills and valleys crafted over eons of evolution. The cerebral cortex, with its intricate grooves, holds the intellect of our species, language, logic, abstract thought. Beneath it, older regions stir with primal forces, emotion, survival, instinct. Each lobe whispers its own dialect. The frontal lobe, sovereign of decision and reason, renders morality and foresight. The occipital lobe, hidden at the back, receives light through the eyes and transfigures it into images, color, and space. The temporal lobe, nestled beside the ears, weaves memory and meaning from the threads of time. And the parietal lobe measures space and sense, painting our position in the fabric of existence. But to understand how the brain works is not to look at structures alone. It is to listen to the language of electricity and chemistry, to the dance of ions across membranes, to the pulsing rhythms of neurons firing in patterns more complex than any symphony. A single neuron is modest, its function humble. It receives, processes, and sends signals. Yet when multiplied by the 100 billion that form the human brain, they become a universe of meaning, a web of ideas, a self-aware system capable of painting canvases, solving equations, writing symphonies, and dreaming of galaxies. The synapse is the sacred space where neurons meet, a microscopic gap where neurotransmitters leap like messengers between realms. Dopamine, serotonin, glutamate, these are the alchemists of thought and feeling. Each molecule, precise and potent, can sculpt moods, awaken memory, or shatter perception. Neurons that fire together, wire together, forging the pathways of learning. Every habit, every skill, every belief is etched by repetition into this living map. The brain, thus, is not static. It is plastic, ever-changing, a river of energy and matter. It rewrites itself in response to every moment you live. The prefrontal cortex, sitting at the crown of reason, is the architect of goals and restraint. It silences impulse, weighs consequences, models futures not yet lived. It is the contemplative monk in the chaos of inner voices. From here we plan, we imagine, we choose. But reason alone does not rule. The amygdala pulses with emotion, sounding alarms when danger lurks, igniting anger or fear or delight. And nestled nearby, the hippocampus records memory, stitching each event into the timeline of a life. It is here that meaning and identity are bound together, where we recall not only what happened, but how it felt. Still deeper, the brainstem stands as a sentinel at the edge of life. It breathes for us. It keeps the heart beating. It regulates the rhythms of sleep and wakefulness. It does not think, it sustains. It is ancient and tireless. Alongside it, the cerebellum, once thought only to guide movement, now reveals its role in cognition, timing, and coordination of mental flow. And if the brain is structure, its function is rhythm. Electroencephalograms reveal waves, alpha, beta, theta, delta, undulating like tides through neural tissue. These brain waves reflect our inner states, focus, rest, sleep, or meditation. In the hush of deep sleep, delta waves cradle us in dreams. In sharp attention, beta waves blaze with activity. The brain speaks in pulses, like a secret code, orchestrating attention and thought like notes in a melody too vast to transcribe. What governs all this, what binds neurons into meaning, is the flow of information, not in the digital sense, but in patterns and probabilities, in feedback loops and hierarchical structures. The brain receives input from the senses, processes it, compares it with memory, evaluates it with emotion, and responds through muscles or silence or speech. It is not merely reactive, it is predictive. Your brain is constantly forecasting the world a few milliseconds ahead, creating a model of reality based on past experience. You never truly see what is there. You see what your brain expects to find. This predictive mind explains why we see faces in clouds or flinch at imagined threats. It also explains genius and madness, for when prediction becomes too rigid or too loose, perception warps, and the world no longer aligns with shared experience. In mental illness, the brain's model of reality misfires. In enlightenment, perhaps, it dissolves altogether. But this organ of thought is not isolated. It is wired into every heartbeat, every gut reaction, every hormonal surge. The brain speaks with the body in a two-way conversation, and this dialogue shapes our mental world. The vagus nerve carries messages from the gut to the brain, influencing mood. Hormones modulate attention and desire. The immune system, long thought separate, now reveals its own form of memory, speaking in cytokines and inflammation, reshaping cognition in illness and stress. And yet, for all its complexity, the brain is not a computer. It does not process binary code. It creates emergent meaning through chaos and connection, intuition and chance. It forgets. It distorts. It dreams. It creates a self, not a file or a program, but a flowing consciousness, a subjective experience that cannot be reduced to data. The mystery deepens when we ask, who within the brain is aware of the brain? Where is the observer, the narrator, the I that witnesses thought? No scan can locate it. No electrode can provoke it. And yet it exists not in one place, but as a process, a whisper that arises from the whole. Consciousness is not a node, but a field, a resonance of the entire neural symphony. It may be the most complex phenomenon in the known universe. The human brain, then, is not simply a machine. It is a storyteller, a sculptor, a mirror to the cosmos. Within it lie the echoes of ancestors, the spark of future ideas, and the quiet hum of dreams not yet dreamed. To understand the brain is not merely to describe its parts, but to stand in awe of its unity. To see that in each thought, a billion cells ignite, that in each second a cascade of meanings flickers into life, and that somehow through this forest of matter arises a being who wonders, who hopes, who asks, how do I work? In the silent corridors of gray and white matter, the story of the brain continues, a tale written not in ink but in pulses of electricity, in tides of calcium ions, in molecular messengers passing through synaptic gaps as old as the human species itself. The architecture of mind is built not only on neurons, but on the spaces between them, on absence as much as presence, on silence as much as firing. These gaps, these synapses, are more than junctions. They are possibilities. Every time a neuron fires, it alters the landscape of connection, strengthening one path, weakening another, sculpting behavior through repetition, intention, and chance. This ever-shifting geometry of the brain forms the foundation of learning. To learn is to change, and the human brain is built for change. From birth, its potential is raw and boundless. An infant enters the world with more synaptic connections than it will ever need, a surplus of links, a chaos of routes. And slowly, through experience, through pruning and strengthening, the neural forest is cleared into trails. These trails become highways. These highways become the very shape of personality. Every experience adds a thread. Every choice carves a groove. Every repetition lays down another stone on the path. What we call knowledge is not a file stored, but a living branching network of associations that adapts with each new moment. This capacity to adapt, neuroplasticity, is the brain's greatest strength and its silent vulnerability. It allows for recovery after trauma, for growth after failure, for transformation across decades. But it also explains how habits root deep, how trauma scars the circuitry, how beliefs harden into prisons. Neuroplasticity does not choose direction. It molds what it is given. Whether a violinist's precise movements or a soldier's reflex to flinch, the brain reinforces what it repeats. Even emotion is learned this way. The response to sadness, to joy, to threat, these are not just reactions. They are ingrained rhythms echoing through limbic circuits shaped by experience and memory. Beneath these rhythms lies a deeper pulse, one guided by time. The brain is a clockmaker, tuned not only to light and darkness but to patterns in hours, days, and seasons. The suprachiasmatic nucleus, a cluster of cells above the optic chiasm, governs circadian rhythms, the ebb and flow of wakefulness and sleep, of hunger and hormone release. This inner clock coordinates our internal states with the external world, ensuring that thoughts arise in sync with light, that sleep descends with the dark. Disruption of this rhythm, through sleeplessness, shift work or artificial light, unbalances mood, cognition, and even immunity. And as sleep falls, another story unfolds. In sleep, the brain does not rest, it reconfigures. It sifts through the debris of waking life, consolidating memory, purging excess, weaving meaning. During REM sleep, the stage of dreams, the brain becomes an artist unbound by logic. Neural circuits fire as vividly as they do in waking, but without the anchoring of sensory input. The result is narrative without constraint, emotion without anchor, creativity without limit. Dreams are the brain's mirror, not of the world as it is, but of how it feels. They reveal fears, longings, questions unspoken. They rearrange the self each night, quietly sculpting understanding beneath awareness. But understanding itself is a rare gift. The brain is not a passive receiver of truth. It is a modeler, a constructor of worlds. Sensory data enters, incomplete and raw. Light falls on the retina. Sound vibrates the cochlea. Molecules tickle receptors in the nose and tongue. These signals are partial, noisy, fragmented. And yet the brain does not see fragments, it sees scenes. It does not hear vibrations, it hears meaning. It binds what it receives with memory, with expectation, with context. What emerges is not a mirror of the world, but a hypothesis, a best guess. We live not in the world as it is, but in the world as the brain predicts it to be. This predictive model is deeply tied to survival. In every moment, the brain must anticipate danger, opportunity, reward. Prediction conserves energy, sharpens reaction, refines choice. And so perception itself becomes a prediction. Even before light reaches conscious awareness, the visual cortex is preparing for what it expects. A shadow becomes a shape. A pattern becomes a face. This expectancy can be genius. It allows for reading, music, and art. But it can also be deception. It creates bias, illusion, even hallucination. The same mechanism that allows for insight also enables error. The brain's reality is always a crafted version, always part truth, part dream. From this dream arises memory, not a vault but a living, breathing system of reconstruction. To remember is not to replay a recording, but to rebuild a moment from scattered traces. The hippocampus binds the elements, place, time, emotion, action. But each retrieval reshapes the memory itself. Like clay molded again and again, a recollection changes every time it is summoned. Memories are thus stories, edited by the present, colored by mood, warped by suggestion. They are more about meaning than accuracy, more about coherence than fact. What matters to the brain is not precision, but narrative, a tale that explains who we are and why. The sense of self arises from this narrative, not from a single place, but from a constellation of systems, from the default mode network that activates in rest and reflection, from the insula that tracks internal sensation, from the medial prefrontal cortex that projects into the future and reviews the past. The self is not a static entity, but an ongoing performance, a pattern of activity that gives rise to continuity. It is the voice that says, I, the center of gravity that persists through change. And yet, it is fragile. Injury, disease, trauma can shatter it. But so too can meditation, psychedelics, deep states of flow, all capable of dissolving the self, revealing the brain's deeper currents beyond identity. Flow, that elusive state of perfect focus, where action becomes effortless and time dissolves, is a testament to the brain's ability to transcend its own boundaries. In flow, the prefrontal cortex quiets. The critic, the doubter, the planner fades. What remains is pure motion, pure engagement. Artists, athletes, scientists all describe it, and in these moments the brain reveals its highest potential, not in thinking about the world, but in becoming the action itself. This harmony of systems, attention, emotion, motor function creates a moment where the self disappears and something greater moves through. Yet even in motion, the brain does not act alone. Every decision, every movement, every blink is choreographed by vast networks, many of which lie beneath awareness. The basal ganglia, deep structures entwined with the cortex, govern habit and initiation. They learn through reward and error, through repetition and adjustment. The cerebellum fine-tunes the timing, the smoothness, the precision, and the motor cortex sends commands down the spinal cord, a thread of communication that reaches every muscle. What feels like intention is in truth a cascade, a conversation among regions, a harmony of preparation and response. In parallel, the emotional circuits prepare the landscape. The amygdala watches for threat. The hypothalamus regulates arousal. The anterior cingulate monitors conflict. Together, they set the tone for action, coloring thought with urgency or calm. Emotion and cognition are not rivals, they are partners. Emotion guides attention, flags relevance, marks meaning. A cold brain cannot choose. A brain without feeling cannot decide. This interplay is ancient, essential, and foundational to every conscious act. And so the human brain is not just an organ of logic or emotion or memory. It is a dynamic interplay of forces, a network of endless complexity, a biological symphony composed over millions of years. It can calculate trajectories, but it can also write poetry. It can recall phone numbers, but also grieve. It can reason through dilemmas, but also dream of other worlds. It is not reducible to its parts, and yet every part matters. Every cell, every connection, every rhythm contributes to the miracle of being. To understand the brain is to look inward and outward at once, to see that the cosmos gave rise to this structure, and that within this structure, the cosmos is reflected back. For in the folds of the brain, in the circuits of thought, lie not only the echoes of survival, but the seeds of wisdom, compassion, and awe. It is the place where physics meets poetry, where biology meets mystery, where life becomes aware of itself and dares to ask, what am I? In the theater of the skull, thought dances with sensation, memory lingers like fading light, and language weaves meaning across the dense lattice of neurons. The brain, in its brilliance, is not merely a processor of the present. It is a storyteller sculpting reality from whispers of experience. Language, among its most exquisite inventions, is not just a tool for communication, but a mirror reflecting the mind's capacity to shape abstract symbols into shared understanding. From guttural sounds to complex grammar, from metaphor to silence, language flows through the neural circuitry like electricity through wire, sparking the rise of civilizations, the formation of culture, and the quiet poetry of internal monologue. The left hemisphere, often associated with analytic detail, plays a pivotal role in language production and structure. Within it, Broca's area, nestled in the frontal lobe, orchestrates the motor elements of speech, how lips part, how vocal cords vibrate, how sentences unfurl. Just behind it, Wernicke's area parses meaning from sound, decoding the rhythms and tones of spoken words into coherent ideas. These regions speak to one another with astonishing speed, coordinated through pathways like the arcuate fasciculus. A single sentence, seemingly effortless, is the culmination of countless neural calculations, a ballet of articulation and comprehension conducted within milliseconds. But language is not confined to speech alone. It blooms in gesture, in sign, in written symbols that echo across history in the form of books, scripts, and digital messages. The brain, ever adaptable, recruits visual and spatial regions to decipher the written word. The occipital lobe registers letters, the angular gyrus helps map meaning, and the prefrontal cortex weaves syntax and inference. Reading is not natural, it must be learned. Yet once mastered, it transforms the mind, allowing the thoughts of the long dead to live again, whispering across centuries from ink on fragile parchment. Beyond language, thought itself takes flight. Abstract reasoning, planning, and imagination arise from the brain's most evolutionarily recent territory, the prefrontal cortex. This region, vast and metabolically hungry, sits like a conductor atop the orchestra of the mind. It does not play a single instrument, but directs attention, organizes behavior, suppresses impulse, and envisions consequences. It is the seat of judgment and foresight, of self-regulation and complex moral reasoning. When we hesitate before speaking, when we choose patience over anger, when we imagine a future not yet real, it is the prefrontal cortex that shapes that moment of grace. From this mental stage, the self emerges not as a fixed entity, but as a dynamic process, ever evolving, ever reflecting, ever constructing. The default mode network, a constellation of regions that activates when the mind wanders, plays a central role in this construction. It is most active when we are not focused on the external world. During rest, memory, daydreaming, and introspection, it binds together past, present, and possible future. It rehearses social interactions, reflects on emotions, and crafts the internal narrative that whispers, "This is who I am." The voice in the mind is not merely passive, it is the composer of the psychological symphony that defines identity. This internal voice does not sing in isolation. Social connection is inscribed into the neural fabric of the brain. Mirror neurons, found in the premotor cortex and inferior parietal lobe, fire not only when we act, but when we observe others acting. They allow us to intuit intention, to feel with another's gesture, to empathize without effort. They are the foundation of understanding, the bridge between minds. Through them, joy becomes contagious, pain becomes shared, and stories evoke tears from strangers. Empathy, far from being a poetic ideal, is a biological reality, one that binds individual brains into collective meaning. Within this collective meaning, emotion takes center stage. More than fleeting moods or irrational impulses, emotions are full-body experiences deeply intertwined with cognition. The amygdala, small and almond-shaped, stands as a sentinel of fear and memory, quick to react, deeply connected to survival. The insula maps bodily states and creates the visceral experience of feeling. The anterior cingulate cortex evaluates error and conflict, alerting us when things go awry. The orbitofrontal cortex tracks rewards and punishments, calibrating pleasure and regret. Together, these regions form a symphony of sensation that flavors every thought, every choice, every memory. Emotion colors the canvas of experience, sharpening what matters, fading what does not. A joyful moment rich in dopamine and oxytocin imprints more deeply. Traumatic shock, flooded with cortisol and adrenaline, can sear itself into memory with painful clarity. But over time, the brain softens the edges. The hippocampus and prefrontal cortex work together to reshape the emotional weight of memory, allowing healing and perspective to unfold. This process, subtle and slow, is what enables growth after loss, peace after pain. It is not forgetting, it is reweaving. The capacity to reweave is the essence of resilience. And resilience, though often spoken of in metaphors of strength, is rooted in neural flexibility. It arises from the interplay between the limbic system, which reacts quickly, and the prefrontal cortex, which regulates. In resilient minds, communication between these regions is fluid and adaptive. Emotional distress is acknowledged, but not overwhelming. Impulses arise but are redirected. Habits of thought, optimism, gratitude, reframing are not mere attitudes. They are neural patterns practiced and reinforced that support recovery and hope. Beneath these psychological patterns lie ancient rhythms, shaped over millions of years of evolution. The brainstem, oldest and most primal, regulates life itself, breathing, heart rate, sleep. The hypothalamus controls hunger and temperature, thirst and reproduction. These deep systems speak the language of survival. They do not plan or reflect, they act, and yet they are not separate from the higher brain. They are integrated, responsive to thought and feeling. A memory can quicken the pulse, an idea can bring tears. In this unity, the brain transcends its layers, fusing instinct and reflection into one continuous stream of being. This stream flows not only within the brain, but between the brain and body. The vagus nerve, wandering from the brainstem through the chest and abdomen, is the great communicator between mind and gut, heart and lungs. It carries signals of safety and distress, of hunger and satiety, of calm and alertness. When the vagus hums in harmony, the body rests, the mind opens, the world feels safe. When it is tense or disrupted, the entire system tightens. The body remembers what the mind forgets. The brain is not an isolated organ, it is the conductor of a bodily symphony, each part resonating with thought. Even within this symphony, attention remains the spotlight. The ability to direct mental focus, to select from the chaos of input what matters most, is among the brain's most powerful gifts. The parietal cortex orients space. The dorsal attention network guides external focus. The ventral network responds to unexpected stimuli. These systems allow us to read a book in a crowded room, to hear our name in a sea of noise, to filter, sort, and sustain. Attention is not passive, it is effortful, limited, shaped by values and emotion. What we attend to becomes our reality, and what we ignore fades into silence. From attention emerges creativity. Creativity is not confined to artists or musicians. It is the brain's natural mode of synthesis. When the default mode and executive networks collaborate, when divergent ideas are combined in novel ways, when the improbable becomes possible, this is creativity at work. It arises not from chaos, but from structured play, from exploration within a scaffold of understanding. It thrives on curiosity, on tolerance for ambiguity, on the willingness to be wrong. Creativity is the brain dreaming forward, shaping not just what is, but what could be. What could be is also the domain of the future, an arena the brain navigates with astonishing complexity. The prefrontal cortex constructs mental simulations, drawing on memory and pattern to anticipate outcomes. It creates if-then scenarios, projects, intentions, sets goals. This temporal leap is the foundation of planning, of delayed gratification, of ethics. To imagine the impact of a decision not just today, but years from now is to transcend instinct. It is the brain at its most visionary, crafting pathways into futures not yet born. And within these futures, meaning arises. The human brain, for all its mechanisms and molecules, longs for significance. It seeks pattern in chaos, purpose in randomness, story in fragments. This search for meaning is not an accident of biology. It is an emergent property of a mind that remembers, that imagines, that reflects. It is the impulse behind philosophy, religion, art, and science. It is the reason why neurons fire not just to survive, but to sing, to wonder, to reach beyond the visible. In every thought, every heartbeat, every flicker of awareness, the brain writes its question into the universe. Why? Why does the brain yearn not only to survive, but to understand? Why does it stretch beyond instinct, beyond immediate need, to explore the invisible threads that weave existence together? This longing, For comprehension is no evolutionary accident. It is an intrinsic pulse of consciousness, rising from the cortex like light from a flame. It is the genesis of science and spirituality, of curiosity and contemplation. The brain does not merely react, it wonders. And in that wonder it constructs the architecture of knowledge, brick by neural brick, across the centuries and within each individual life. Perception forms the gateway to this architecture. Every moment, the senses deliver a flood of data to the brain, light striking the retina, sound vibrating the cochlea, chemicals brushing the tongue. But these signals are not experienced raw. They are filtered, interpreted, transformed. The thalamus relays them like a switchboard operator, routing input to the appropriate cortical region. The occipital lobe renders vision. The temporal lobe crafts sound. The somatosensory cortex reads the body's map. Yet what we see, hear, and feel is not a mirror of reality. It is a model, edited, colored, completed by the brain's expectations and past. These expectations are born of prediction. The brain is not a passive receiver, but a predictive machine, constantly anticipating the next moment. This is the principle of predictive coding, a theory that suggests the brain minimizes error by comparing incoming data with prior models. When sensory input matches prediction, little effort is required. But when reality deviates, the brain must adapt. This error correction lies at the heart of learning, of perception, of consciousness itself. It is why illusions deceive us, why habits are hard to break, and why surprise sharpens attention. We do not merely perceive, we predict and revise. Learning itself, the refinement of prediction, is embedded in the plasticity of the brain. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change its structure and function in response to experience, is its most astonishing trait. From the pruning of unused connections in childhood to the strengthening of pathways through repetition, the brain is never static. Long-term potentiation, the molecular process by which neurons strengthen their bonds, underlies memory. Hebs, rule, cells that fire together, wire together, captures this in simple form. Each repetition lays down a groove. Each new thought reshapes the terrain. This terrain is not uniform. Different regions specialize, yet all are interconnected. The parietal lobe integrates sensory information, helping us navigate space and body. The temporal lobe houses memory and emotion. The occipital lobe renders sight. The cerebellum, once thought to only manage movement, now reveals roles in cognition, language, and rhythm. The corpus callosum bridges the hemispheres, allowing the right and left to collaborate. Each region contributes its melody, but the song of thought emerges from the synchrony of the whole. Synchronous activity forms the rhythms of the brain, neural oscillations that pulse across frequencies and functions. Delta waves cradle deep sleep. Theta waves whisper through dreams and creativity. Alpha waves mark calm alertness. Beta waves guide focus and movement. Gamma waves surge in moments of insight and integration. These brain waves are not static categories but dynamic symphonies, rising and falling, overlapping and shifting. They are the background hum of consciousness, the brain's silent music as it moves through sleep and wake, thought and dream. Sleep, though still a mystery, is one of the brain's most vital functions. During slumber, the body rests, but the mind works. The brain consolidates memory, clears metabolic waste, and resets emotional balance. REM sleep brings vivid dreams and narrative simulation. Slow-wave sleep restores energy and embeds learning. The glymphatic system, a network that flushes toxins from the brain, activates during sleep, hinting at sleep's role in neuroprotection. Chronic sleep deprivation frays cognition, impairs judgment, erodes mood. Sleep is not idleness. It is a nightly pilgrimage into renewal. Dreams emerge from this pilgrimage like flickering lanterns. They are not random hallucinations, but a kind of nocturnal theater, where the brain rehearses fears, explores desires, solves problems. Theories abound. Freud's wish fulfillment, Hobson's activation synthesis, Ravonsuo's threat simulation. What is certain is that dreaming engages many of the same regions as waking thought, yet untethered from sensory input. The prefrontal cortex, seat of logic, quiets. The limbic system, seat of emotion, awakens. In this altered state, the mind plays freely with memory, metaphor, and meaning. Meaning is never isolated. The brain is a social organ, evolved within tribes and shaped by relationship. Social cognition, the ability to infer intentions, emotions, beliefs, relies on networks involving the medial prefrontal cortex, temporoparietal junction, and superior temporal sulcus. These regions light up when we think about others, empathize with their pain, judge fairness, or navigate complex social rules. From infancy, the brain tunes itself to the gaze and voice of caregivers. Language is acquired through interaction. Morality emerges in shared experience. Even the sense of self is partially constructed in relation to others. Identity, that fragile and persistent thread of I, is not housed in a single spot, but arises from networks of memory, attention, emotion, and narrative. The autobiographical self draws from the hippocampus, which stitches together episodic memory, the prefrontal cortex, which reflects and evaluates, and the insular cortex, which integrates bodily feeling. Trauma can fracture this thread. Practice, such as mindfulness or therapy, can strengthen it. The self is not static. It shifts across time and state, fluid yet coherent. It is less a thing and more a story the brain tells itself, a story constantly revised, but rarely abandoned. In some moments, the self dissolves. Meditation, flow states, psychedelic experiences, and near-death episodes can quiet the default mode network and blur the boundary between self and world. These altered states of consciousness reveal the flexibility of the mind. The boundaries of perception, thought, and identity can stretch, bend, reform. Such states often bring profound insight, euphoria, or awe. They suggest that consciousness is not a single point, but a spectrum, a field that can narrow or expand, sharpen or soften, deepen or dissolve. Yet consciousness itself, the raw experience of awareness, remains the brain's most enigmatic creation. How do electrical signals in tissue give rise to color, taste, joy, sorrow? This hard problem, as philosopher David Chalmers framed it, has yet to yield to scientific explanation. Neural correlates of consciousness, specific patterns of brain activity associated with conscious experience, have been mapped, but they do not explain the leap from firing neurons to felt experience. Integrated information theory, global workspace theory, and other models offer insight, but the essence of consciousness remains elusive. It is the ghost in the machine, the candle in the dark. Still, the brain strives to understand itself. It builds tools, microscopes, electrodes, scanners, to peer into its own architecture. Functional MRI reveals blood flow as proxy for activity. EEG captures electrical rhythms. Optogenetics, in animals, allows specific neurons to be turned on or off with light. Connectomics aims to map every neural pathway, a vast atlas of interconnection. Artificial intelligence simulates neural learning, offering new metaphors. And yet, despite these tools, the inner life of mind, its joys, sorrows, questions, still resists complete translation. The brain is not merely an object of study. It is also the subject doing the studying. And in this recursive mystery lies the brilliance of being human. The brain is the only known structure in the universe that can contemplate the universe and itself. It can imagine stars it has never seen, feel grief for people it has never met, construct theories of time, and write songs about silence. It can transcend the present, travel through memory, simulate possibility. It can love. It can hope. It can create. It is not a perfect organ. It forgets. It breaks. It errs. But it is beautiful in its imperfection, luminous in its striving. It is the cradle of every poem, every invention, every revolution. It is the silence behind prayer, the electricity behind touch, the warmth behind a glance. It is matter dreaming itself into meaning, and as it dreams, it builds cathedrals of thought from fragile threads of chemistry. It takes the fire of neurons and forges art, science, civilization. All of this, every insight, every heartbeat, every flicker of awareness, resides within 3 pounds of tissue, protected by bone, nourished by blood, and humming with mystery. The human brain, still largely unexplored, remains the most intricate object we have ever encountered, and within it we carry not only the history of evolution, but the promise of the future. Beneath the folds and furrows of the cortex lies a delicate geometry, a labyrinth of neurons forming intricate constellations, shaping the scaffold of thought and sensation. Each cell pulses with electric potential, reaching toward another across the microscopic chasm of a synapse. This synaptic dialogue is the whispering language of the brain, as ions flow and neurotransmitters leap like sparks across a dark canyon. The cascade is endless, billions of neurons, each forming thousands of connections, orchestrating the mind's endless concerto. The neurotransmitters are the chemicals of mood, memory, and movement. Dopamine, the molecule of anticipation, and reward, courses through the mesolimbic pathway, lighting desire and driving action. It fuels addiction and ambition, focus and elation. Serotonin regulates mood and sleep, its gentle presence linked to peace and emotional balance. Norepinephrine sharpens attention and arousal, while GABA calms and inhibits, applying the brakes to overexcited networks. Glutamate, the primary excitatory messenger, forms the spine of learning and plasticity. Acetylcholine modulates attention and muscle contraction. These chemicals do not act in isolation but as a chorus, their harmonies shaping thought, personality, and perception. Each chemical imbalance creates a different inner world. Depression may descend when serotonin falters. Schizophrenia might emerge when dopamine floods unchecked. Anxiety rises when norepinephrine surges without balance. These are not simply emotional conditions. They are alterations in the brain's biochemistry, architecture, and rhythm. And yet, even in disorder, the brain adapts, compensates, resists. Neurodiversity, autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and beyond reveals not flaws but variations, different styles of processing and engaging with the world. The brain's defenses, too, are elaborate. The blood-brain barrier shields this vital organ from toxins and pathogens. A sentinel formed of tight-junctioned endothelial cells, it allows selective passage, admitting glucose and oxygen, denying many threats. When it is breached by infection, inflammation, or injury, the consequences can be devastating. Yet within this fortress, glial cells stand guard and serve. Once thought passive, glia are now known to be crucial. Astrocytes regulate neurotransmitters and blood flow. Microglia patrol for invaders, clearing debris. Oligodendrocytes insulate neurons with myelin, speeding signals like insulation around a wire. The brain is not neurons alone. It is a vibrant ecosystem of support and regulation. Injury, whether by trauma, stroke, or disease, can fracture this ecosystem. A blow to the head might shear axons, disrupt networks, silence memories. A stroke, the sudden blockage or rupture of a vessel, starves tissue of oxygen, killing cells within minutes. Neurodegenerative diseases, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS erode slowly, unraveling thought, movement, and identity. Plaques and tangles accumulate, neurons die, and once familiar lives drift into shadow. Yet even amid loss, the brain's resilience persists. New neurons can grow, new pathways can form, hope threads through the labyrinth of decline. Memory is among the first to fade in such conditions, revealing its fragility. It is not a single thing, but a spectrum. Working memory, managed by the prefrontal cortex, holds the present in focus. Short-term memory bridges moments. Long-term memory stores the story of a life. Declarative memory recalls facts and events, dependent on the hippocampus. Procedural memory remembers skills, riding a bike, playing piano, anchored in the basal ganglia and cerebellum. Emotional memory, entwined with the amygdala, stores the echoes of joy and fear. Each memory is not fixed, but fluid, reconstructed with every retrieval, shaped by mood and context. The hippocampus is the brain's archivist, encoding experience and consolidating it during sleep. It binds time and place, linking fragments into narrative. Damage to it erases the ability to form new memories, trapping the mind in an eternal present. And yet, other regions adapt. The brain, ever plastic, recruits unused territory, creates workarounds. In the blind, the visual cortex may process sound. In the deaf, auditory regions may engage in sight. This cross-modal plasticity is not compensation. It is the brain's deep capacity for reinvention. And at the heart of this reinvention is attention, the spotlight of consciousness. Attention selects, filters, amplifies. It is limited yet powerful. Without it, perception fades, memory falters, learning slows. The parietal and frontal lobes coordinate its dance, shifting focus from task to task, moment to moment. The reticular activating system, deep in the brainstem, modulates alertness. Distraction is its shadow. When attention is scattered, coherence dissolves. In the digital age, the battle for attention has become a war for identity, as algorithms and devices compete to occupy the mind's gaze. Language, perhaps the brain's most astonishing invention, flows from attention and memory. It transforms thought into sound, symbol into meaning. Broca's area, in the frontal lobe, orchestrates speech. Wernicke's area, in the temporal lobe, interprets meaning. The angular gyrus bridges written and spoken language. Arcuate fasciculus connects them, a neural superhighway of syntax. Together, these regions allow the abstract to become tangible, the invisible to become heard. Through language, we share dreams, bind communities, preserve time. But language does more than transmit, it shapes thought. The words we know influence the categories we form, the distinctions we notice. Linguistic relativity, long debated, now finds evidence in brain scans. Different languages activate different patterns of attention and memory. Bilingualism reshapes the brain, strengthening executive control and cognitive flexibility. Storytelling, the oldest form of knowledge, organizes experience into structure, beginning, middle, end, imposing order on chaos, meaning on randomness. Meaning is the compass of the mind. Without it, life drifts. The brain is not content with data, it seeks purpose. This purpose is constructed in networks that link memory, emotion, and value. The default mode network, the salience network, the executive network. Together they determine what matters, what is ignored, what is remembered. Meaning arises not from facts but from the connections between them, from pattern and perspective. It is why art moves us, why ritual comforts, why symbols endure. Spirituality and transcendence also have neural signatures. The parietal lobe quiets, diminishing the sense of boundary between self and world. The prefrontal cortex may modulate judgment, allowing awe and surrender. The limbic system floods with emotion. Mystical experience is not delusion. It is a reorganization of perception, often life-changing. Whether rooted in meditation, music, or nature, such moments suggest the brain's longing not just to know, but to belong, to dissolve into something greater than itself. Morality, too, has neural roots. Empathy arises from the mirror neuron system, allowing us to feel another's joy or pain. The ventromedial prefrontal cortex processes ethical dilemmas, integrating logic and emotion. The anterior cingulate detects injustice and conflict. These systems enable fairness, guilt, generosity, traits once thought purely cultural. Even infants show moral intuition. Culture shapes values, but the brain supplies the soil. The social brain is wired for connection. Isolation wounds it. Loneliness activates pain circuits, increases inflammation, disrupts sleep. Social rejection is felt as deeply as physical harm. yet bonding heals. Oxytocin, the love hormone, promotes trust and closeness. Touch, eye contact, shared laughter, all regulate neurochemistry. From birth, the brain is sculpted by relationship. A caregiver's. Voice gaze and rhythm wire emotional circuits. Attachment builds resilience. Trauma, when early or chronic, wires for hypervigilance, shame, withdrawal. But healing is possible. Relationships can rewire what pain once carved. Childhood is the crucible of neural development. From the womb, the brain senses sound, touch, even maternal stress. At birth, a newborn possesses nearly all the neurons it will ever have, but few connections. Experience shapes those synapses. Language exposure, emotional safety, stimulation, play. The first 3 years see explosive growth. Adversity, if buffered by support, can be overcome. But if neglected or abused, the brain adapts to survive, not thrive. The architecture of resilience is relational. Adolescence brings a second wave of rewiring. The prefrontal cortex, seat of judgment, matures last. Meanwhile, the limbic system, sensitive to reward and risk, dominates. This mismatch explains teenage impulsivity, emotion, daring. It is not dysfunction, it is a necessary recalibration, preparing the brain for independence. During this time, identity crystallizes, values form, and social belonging becomes paramount. Sleep shifts, sensitivity heightens, and learning surges. It is a time of vulnerability and of vast possibility, and then adulthood, where the brain balances stability and change. Habits form, careers build, relationships deepen. The brain becomes efficient, less plastic but more precise. Emotion regulation improves, perspective broadens. Yet even now, the brain is not fixed. Learning a new skill, practicing a language, cultivating mindfulness, these still reshape structure and function. Aging is not decay alone, it is transformation. As the years unfold, the aging brain enters a season of subtle shifts. Processing speed slows, reaction time extends like a widening echo, and multitasking becomes a more laborious dance. But alongside these changes blooms a surprising depth of emotional regulation, a steadier compass in the face of life's storms. The amygdala, once quick to respond to fear, becomes more tempered, while the prefrontal cortex lends wisdom earned from decades of pattern recognition. Aging does not hollow the mind, it refines it. Crystallized intelligence, the stored knowledge and strategies from a life lived, often strengthens with time. Memory may become more selective, names may slip, facts may flutter at the edges of recall, but meaning remains rooted. The hippocampus, though vulnerable to atrophy, continues to participate in memory formation, especially when stimulated through novelty and emotional resonance. Elders often exhibit a positivity bias, recalling pleasant memories more readily than painful ones, suggesting a neurological prioritization of emotional balance in later years. This psychological resilience is not accidental, but biological, sculpted by circuits that value peace over conflict as the body ages. Creativity can also deepen with age. The default mode network, implicated in imagination, reflection, and narrative construction, remains active and malleable. The mature brain often integrates divergent experiences into cohesive understanding, fostering creative insight. Pain and joy, failure and triumph, are no longer opposites but woven into one thread. The artist at 70 may paint with fewer brushstrokes but greater depth. The poet in fewer lines captures a universe. And then there is sleep, the shadowy scaffolding on which brain health rests. As we age, sleep architecture changes. Deep sleep becomes lighter, REM cycles shorter, and awakenings more frequent. Yet sleep remains essential. It is during these dark hours that the brain's glymphatic system, a recently discovered cleansing mechanism, flushes out metabolic waste, including beta-amyloid, a protein associated with Alzheimer's. Dreams bloom in REM sleep, drawing strange connections and emotional insights. Sleep is not escape, it is active curation. Without it, memory falters, mood sours, and cognition unravels. Yet even with care, decline may come. Neurodegenerative diseases cast long shadows, slowly erasing identity. Alzheimer's disease ravages the hippocampus, then spreads like a slow fire. Parkinson's disrupts dopamine-producing neurons, stealing motion and expression. Huntington's attacks with genetic inevitability. These diseases challenge not only biology but dignity, connection, and care. And yet, science presses forward, mapping proteins, decoding genes, trialing treatments. The frontier of neuroscience is driven not only by curiosity, but by compassion. Technology, too, is becoming the brain's ally. Brain-computer interfaces promise communication for the locked-in, prosthetics controlled by thought, even memory enhancement. Artificial intelligence mimics neural architectures, deep learning, convolutional layers, mirroring the brain's complexity, to create machines that recognize, translate, and synthesize. But the brain is not silicon. Its elegance lies in its imperfection, its unpredictability, its softness. It does not calculate, it feels, dreams, and decides. In parallel, brain imaging has become a luminous window into the mind's secret activity. Functional MRI lights up with blood flow, revealing regions engaged in thought, sensation, emotion. Diffusion tensor imaging maps white matter tracts, highways of thought. Magnetoencephalography captures the whispering speed of neurons firing. These technologies unveil the live orchestra of the brain, turning mystery into map. But maps are not territory. No scan can yet decode a thought, no electrode fully translate a feeling. The brain remains partially veiled. Still, through the fog of limitation, a revolution is stirring. Neuroscience is beginning to see not in fragments, emotion here, memory there, but in networks. The connectomy, the complete wiring diagram of the brain, is being charted. Each brain's connectome is as unique as a fingerprint, shaped by genetics, experience, trauma, and love. The Human Connectome Project, the Blue Brain Project, and countless labs are stitching together the full fabric of the mind. They seek not a universal model, but the full richness of variation. This understanding brings with it ethical weight. As we learn more, we must ask, what is the self if it can be altered by a pill, a zap of electricity, or a line of code? If memory can be erased or enhanced, what becomes of identity? If consciousness can be simulated, what becomes of soul? These questions are no longer speculative, they are looming. Consciousness itself remains the great frontier. Despite centuries of philosophy and decades of science, we still do not know how subjective experience arises from physical matter. Why should electrical patterns give rise to the taste of strawberries, the ache of nostalgia, the feel of being me? Some theories posit global neuronal workspaces, broad synchronization of regions as the source of awareness. Others look to integrated information, complexity, or quantum processes. Yet none fully grasp the spark, and still we experience it. We are not only aware, we are aware of being aware. This recursive self-awareness, this metacognition, is perhaps the brain's most exquisite capacity. It allows reflection, morality, art, and suffering. The brain not only perceives the world but wonders about it. It questions itself, doubts, dreams, and aspires. It reaches beyond the boundaries of the physical to imagine the infinite. The arts arise from this yearning. Music activates not just auditory cortex but emotion, memory, and movement. Dance unites motor planning, rhythm, and social mirroring. Painting and sculpture engage spatial reasoning, symbolic transformation, and abstraction. Poetry invokes linguistic precision, emotional nuance, and metaphorical fluidity. All these acts are both expression and perception, internal landscapes made visible. Religion and philosophy are not separable from brain function. They may arise from the same neural machinery as story, morality, and awe. The temporal lobe, particularly in the right hemisphere, has been implicated in spiritual experience. Meditative states slow parietal activity, reducing the sense of separateness. Psychedelic substances, such as psilocybin and DMT, flood the brain with novelty and connection, disrupting the default mode network and allowing ego to dissolve. Whether one sees these as chemical illusions or revelations, the brain remains their vessel. But perhaps the most beautiful truth about the brain is this: it is not isolated. It exists in constant dialogue with the body and the world. The gut, rich in neurons and microbes, communicates bidirectionally with the brain, shaping mood and immunity. Hormones surge from glands, influencing cognition, desire, and stress. The skin, with its millions of sensory nerves, informs the brain about texture, temperature, and touch. The immune system, long thought separate, now reveals feedback loops with emotion and cognition. There is no dualism. Mind and body are one system. The environment, too, enters the brain. Air quality, light, sound, nature all sculpt neural circuits. Trauma can leave physical scars in gray matter. Love can heal them. Loneliness shrinks parts of the hippocampus. Community can restore them. Neuroplasticity is not just internal. It is ecological. The brain adapts not in a vacuum, but in context. And so we are left with a paradox. The brain is the source of our individuality, yet it is profoundly shaped by connection. It creates the sense of self, yet that self emerges only through relationship, language, and story. We are not brains in jars, we are embodied, embedded, entangled. To study the brain, then, is not merely to explore a machine, but to embark on a journey through identity, suffering, joy, creativity, and transcendence. The more we understand it, the more we glimpse the complexity of the human spirit. It is not cold computation, but warm awareness. It does not merely process, it dreams. It does not merely survive, it yearns. And in every moment as you read these words, your brain is alive with electrical fire and chemical shimmer. It is decoding language, filtering emotion, linking idea to idea. It is remembering, projecting, imagining, and feeling. In you, the universe becomes aware of itself. In your brain, billions of years of evolution culminate in consciousness. You are not a passenger of the brain. You are the brain becoming self-aware. The brain does not simply exist as an object of study. It emerges as a living symphony, a dynamic architecture shaped by time, biology, and experience. Beneath the layers of matter and current lies a timeless rhythm, where cells whisper across synapses and thoughts bloom like sparks in the night. This living structure is not fixed in stone, but sculpted moment by moment, always becoming, always remaking itself. At the core of this transformation is neuroplasticity, the breathtaking ability of the brain to rewire, adapt, and regenerate. In early development, plasticity reigns supreme. Neurons branch like wild vines, synapses fire chaotically, and the mind absorbs the world with a voracious, unfiltered hunger. This is the window where language is acquired with ease, where skills are mimicked through mirror neurons, where play becomes neural rehearsal. But plasticity is not the privilege of childhood alone. It remains, subtle yet persistent, through every season of life. When a violinist practices, regions controlling finger movement expand. When a stroke survivor learns to speak again, dormant networks awaken to assume lost functions. The blind develop heightened auditory and tactile precision. The deaf experience visual cortex reallocation. The brain reconfigures itself in response to necessity, to effort, to intention. What once was thought impossible is now seen as inevitable. Change, encoded in the brain's very blueprint. This adaptability is most striking when trauma is involved. Physical injury to the brain may erase memory, motor control, or personality itself. But through therapy, repetition, and sometimes sheer will, parts of the mind find new routes, detours around the damage. Emotional trauma, too, leaves neural imprints. Chronic stress enlarges the amygdala, shrinks the hippocampus, and blunts the prefrontal cortex. But healing is possible. Through safety, connection, and therapeutic intervention, damaged circuits can recover. Neuroplasticity, then, is not just science. it is hope. Hope also lies in the profound discovery that the brain can change through thought itself. Cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness, and meditation, all practices of inner reflection, are shown to shift activity in the brain. Negative thought patterns diminish the insula's regulation of bodily discomfort. Gratitude, compassion, and optimism increase activity in regions associated with pleasure and empathy. The inner life reshapes the outer structure. Belief becomes biology. In the contemplative traditions of the world, this insight is ancient. Monks in Himalayan monasteries, meditating for tens of thousands of hours, exhibit unique neurological profiles: thicker cortices, slower default mode network activity, increased gamma oscillations. Their perception of reality changes. They experience less fear, greater equanimity, and a sense of unity with all things. These are not illusions, but measurable states, grounded in the reshaping of the brain by consciousness itself. Meditation is not the only portal. Artistic expression, music, painting, writing, also fosters neurological transformation. When engaged deeply, the brain enters a state of flow, where the sense of time dissolves, the critic goes silent, and creativity rises from beneath the surface. In flow, dopamine surges, the prefrontal cortex quiets, and cognition becomes liquid. Athletes, scientists, dancers, coders, all who touch the edge of mastery describe this altered state. It is not escapism. It is a homecoming to the most natural rhythm of the mind. But the rhythms of the brain are not always harmonious. Mental illness remains a shadow that can fall across even the brightest minds. Depression slows thought, dulls pleasure, and warps memory. Anxiety floods the nervous system with alarms, seeing danger where there is none. Schizophrenia fragments perception, blurring the boundary between self and world. Bipolar disorder lifts and plunges the mood with dizzying velocity. These are not signs of weakness. They are expressions of neural imbalance, genetic loading, environmental strain. Modern neuroscience has begun to peel back the layers. Imbalances in neurotransmitters, serotonin, dopamine, glutamate, are implicated. Malfunctioning circuits in the prefrontal cortex, the limbic system, and the basal ganglia have been mapped. Treatments range from pharmacology to cognitive therapy to neuromodulation. Electroconvulsive therapy, once stigmatized, now shows remarkable effectiveness for severe depression. Transcranial magnetic stimulation offers new paths to healing without drugs. And deep brain stimulation, originally used for Parkinson's, is being explored for obsessive-compulsive disorder and treatment-resistant depression. Yet even as technology deepens our understanding, the mystery of subjective suffering remains. Two people with similar brain scans may live vastly different lives. One may find meaning, the other despair. One may recover, the other unravel. Biology sets the stage, but narrative shapes the play. And in that space between brain and story, healing often occurs. The stories we tell about ourselves are not mere fictions. They are neural constructions, deeply embedded in memory and imagination. The default mode network, active during rest, reflection, and self-referencing, builds these internal narratives. It is here that we rehearse conversations, envision futures, reframe past wounds. When the default mode network becomes overactive, as in rumination, suffering deepens. But when balanced, it becomes a source of resilience, creativity, and insight. Language is the tool we use to construct these stories, and the brain's capacity for language is one of its crowning achievements. Broca's area, Wernicke's area, the angular gyrus, the arcuate fasciculus, together they form the language network, a web that turns thought into sound and sound into meaning. Human infants are born with a universal phonetic potential, capable of learning any language. But by 1 year old, their brains prune unused sounds, tuning themselves to the native tongue. Bilingualism strengthens executive function, increasing mental flexibility, attention, and memory. Poetry activates both hemispheres, demanding precision and emotion. Metaphor lights up sensory and abstract networks simultaneously. Language does not just describe the world, it shapes it. Words carve reality into categories, and through them, we think. But not all thought is linguistic. Much of the brain operates in silence. Visual processing, spatial navigation, emotional intuition, these emerge without words. The right hemisphere, often associated with holistic perception, musicality, and body awareness, complements the analytical left. Together, they form a unity of contrast, a dialogue between precision and ambiguity, detail and gestalt. This dialogue becomes especially poignant in dreams. Every night, the brain enters a cycle of shifting consciousness, plunging through non-REM into REM, where the most vivid dreams unfold. During REM sleep, the body is paralyzed, the prefrontal cortex quiet, the limbic system active, logic retreats, emotion reigns, time fractures. The result is a theater of the unconscious, where memories blend with fears, desires with symbols. Dreams serve not just to entertain but to process, rehearse, and integrate. They are the original virtual reality, crafted by the brain itself. Lucid dreaming, becoming aware within a dream, is a doorway into conscious exploration of the unconscious. Through practice, some learn to direct their dreams, flying, solving problems, or confronting fears. The implications are profound. If consciousness can awaken within the dream, perhaps it can also awaken more deeply in waking life. Awakening in the neural sense also has a physiological basis. The reticular activating system, a bundle of neurons in the brainstem, regulates arousal, attention, and sleep. It is the gatekeeper of awareness. Damage to this system results in coma or unresponsiveness. Activation brings the world into focus. Attention is not passive reception, it is selection, guided by goals, novelty, and emotional salience. What we see is not everything. We see what the brain chooses to see. And that choice is shaped by experience. The brain is not a camera, but a prediction machine. The predictive processing model of neuroscience suggests that perception is an ongoing negotiation between internal models and external input. The brain constantly anticipates, compares, and updates. This allows for astonishing speed, but also for illusion. We do not see reality. We see a constructed, filtered version of it. This filtering extends to memory. We think of memory as storage, but it is reconstruction. Each time we recall, we rebuild. Details shift, context intrudes, emotion colors. Over time, memories become stories, polished and reshaped. Yet they feel true. And that feeling of truth is its own neural signature, a convergence of prefrontal, temporal, and limbic activity that says, "This happened." But not all memory fades gently. Some persists with vivid, unrelenting clarity. In post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic memories hijack the brain's systems. The amygdala stays hyperactive, the hippocampus underperforms, and the cortex loses its moderating power. The past becomes present again and again. Healing requires not erasing memory but integrating it, creating new neural pathways of safety and meaning. Integration is perhaps the brain's deepest task. Across billions of neurons, hundreds of regions, and endless variation, the brain must achieve coherence. It must unify thought, emotion, perception, and behavior. It must balance impulse and restraint, novelty and routine, isolation and connection. And when it succeeds, even for a moment, we experience clarity, flow, presence. In those moments, the noise recedes, the chatter quiets, and what remains is the silence beneath thought, the stillness in which the brain meets the mystery of existence. This stillness, rare and fleeting, is the doorway to awe, a neural state that humbles and expands. Awe arises when the brain confronts vastness it cannot immediately understand, whether gazing at the stars, witnessing the birth of a child, or hearing a symphony that seems to suspend time. In those moments, the default self recedes. The boundaries between observer and observed soften. The posterior cingulate cortex and medial prefrontal cortex, centers of self-reference, grow quiet. The parietal lobe, which orients us in space, diminishes its hold. In their place, the brain welcomes openness, surrender, and wonder. Such states remind us that the brain is not merely a calculator of logic, but a cathedral of experience, beauty, mystery, transcendence. These are not ornaments. The mind. They are signatures of its deepest function. The brain was not built solely to survive. It was built to seek meaning. Meaning is not stored in any single location. It emerges from networks, from the interplay between memory and emotion, vision and language, reflection and sensation. The sigh. Limbic system lights the path with feeling. The prefrontal cortex evaluates and assigns value. The hippocampus provides context. The anterior cingulate integrates conflict. And when they work in concert, the brain constructs narratives that make suffering bearable, joy comprehensible, and existence coherent. Yet coherence is fragile. When brain networks misalign, even meaning can fracture. In neurological conditions, like dementia, meaning is one of the first casualties. Alzheimer's disease begins quietly, misplaced keys, forgotten names, but progresses into a storm of disorientation, confusion, and emotional volatility. The hippocampus withers. Amyloid plaques and tau tangles disrupt communication. Long-term, memory outlasts short-term recall, but eventually even the self becomes a stranger. Despite its devastation, dementia reveals something profound. Emotional resonance often remains. Even in late stages, patients may sing familiar songs, respond to touch, or cry at a remembered voice. These responses suggest that while explicit, memory fades. The emotional brain, the amygdala, the basal ganglia, the sensory cortices endures longer. Music therapy, art, touch, and nature can reach where words cannot. The brain remembers in ways we do not understand. Memory is not the only domain where the brain's secrets stretch beyond comprehension. Consciousness itself remains one of the most formidable mysteries. We know that consciousness is correlated with brain activity, but we do not know how or why. The binding problem, how disparate neural events combine into a unified subjective experience, remains unsolved. The hard problem, how physical processes give rise to the feeling of being, remains untouched by measurement. Many theories compete. Integrated information theory suggests that consciousness arises from the integration of information across a system. Global workspace theory posits that consciousness occurs when information becomes globally accessible across the brain. Panpsychism proposes that consciousness is a fundamental feature of all matter. Some physicists suggest quantum processes might be involved. Yet no theory can yet explain why red feels red, or what it's like to taste rain or remember a childhood. And what is certain is that the brain alone is not enough. Consciousness is not in the brain like music is in a radio. It is a process, a relationship between neural activity, body state, environment, and attention. The brain shapes consciousness, but so does the gut, the skin, the heart, the air. Embodied cognition reminds us that thinking is not confined to the skull. It flows through posture, gesture, breath. This holistic view also informs how we understand social connection. Human beings are wired to connect. From infancy, gaze, voice, and touch shape the brain. Mirror neurons respond not only to our own actions but to the actions of others. The insula and anterior cingulate light up with shared pain. Oxytocin bonds, dopamine rewards, serotonin stabilizes. Loneliness does more than sting. It inflames, accelerates aging, increases risk of disease. Connection heals because the brain is built for it. Empathy, the capacity to feel with another, is one of the brain's most complex and exquisite functions. Cognitive empathy, understanding another's perspective, relies on the medial prefrontal cortex. Emotional empathy, feeling what another feels, relies on the limbic system and the inferior frontal gyrus. Compassion activates the nucleus accumbens, rewarding care. These circuits are not fixed. They grow with use. A brain trained in empathy becomes more empathetic. But empathy can also be overwhelmed. The constant stream of global suffering can numb the circuits meant to protect and connect us. Compassion fatigue, decision paralysis, and emotional burnout are not moral failures. They are neurological limits. The brain must learn when to feel deeply and when to pause, not to abandon care, but to sustain it. This balance is part of emotional regulation, a function governed by the prefrontal cortex's modulation of the amygdala and the autonomic nervous system. When well regulated, the brain can tolerate stress, delay gratification, and respond instead of react. When dysregulated, it spirals into reactivity, fight, flight, freeze. Trauma, chronic stress, and neglect erode regulation. But mindfulness, therapy, and co-regulation, calming presence from others, can restore it. Co-regulation is the first language we ever learn. A newborn's nervous system calibrates itself to the caregiver's tone, heartbeat, and gaze. The ventral vagus nerve, part of the parasympathetic system, activates social engagement, softening the eyes, relaxing the breath, inviting trust. Polyvagal theory explores how safety cues regulate brain function. Safety is not just a feeling, it is a neural state. Safety allows exploration. Without it, the brain contracts. With it, the brain plays. Play is not trivial. It is cognitive rehearsal, emotional regulation, and creative experimentation. In play, the brain explores what if. In adults, this continues through humor, metaphor, invention. The prefrontal cortex relaxes, control, and novelty blooms. The brain, when safe, becomes curious. And curiosity is the seed of learning. Learning at its root is synaptic change. It is Hebb's law. Neurons that fire together wire together. Every repetition strengthens the signal. Every variation refines. The cerebellum refines motor learning. The hippocampus stores episodic traces. The neocortex integrates and generalizes. Spaced repetition, emotional engagement, and rest all enhance retention. Sleep, especially slow-wave and REM cycles, consolidates learning. The dreaming brain is also the remembering brain, but the brain forgets as much as it remembers. Forgetting is not failure, it is filtration. The brain must prune irrelevant connections to stay flexible. Long-term potentiation and long-term depression, strengthening and weakening of synapses, work together to adapt. Disorders like hyperthymesia, where every detail is remembered, reveal that forgetting is a mercy. Memory without forgetting overwhelms. And still, some memories refuse to fade. Music especially lingers. It activates the auditory cortex, but also the motor system, the limbic brain, and even the visual cortex. A song can transport us through decades. It anchors identity. This is why music therapy reaches Alzheimer's patients, trauma survivors, and those in coma. The musical brain is deeply rooted, older than language. Older still is rhythm, even infants entrained to a beat. The basal ganglia and cerebellum synchronize movement and timing. Rhythm shapes perception and action. It underlies speech, walking, heartbeat. The brain loves rhythm because the universe is rhythmic day and night. Inhale and exhale, pulse and pause. In rhythm, the brain finds order. This order is also found in symmetry, in pattern, in geometry. The visual cortex processes lines, edges, curves, depth. The fusiform gyrus recognizes faces. The parahippocampal place area maps scenes. The visuals. Brain does not merely capture, it constructs. Optical illusions reveal its shortcuts. What we see is shaped by what we expect to see. Expectation is the sculptor of perception. A shadow becomes a threat. A neutral face becomes hostile. A familiar object appears from noise. The brain does not wait passively. It anticipates, infers, and completes. Top-down processing guides bottom-up. Input. Belief shapes experience. Belief itself is a neural construct. The ventromedial prefrontal cortex, dorsolateral cortex, and default mode network all participate. Religious belief, moral conviction, political ideology, They all emerge from complex interactions of emotion, identity, memory, and culture. The brain seeks coherence. It prefers certainty. But it is also capable of doubt, nuance, and transformation. Transformation is not rare. It is constant. The brain renews itself continuously. Cells die and are replaced. Synapses are trimmed and rebuilt. Identity shifts with age, experience, and reflection. We are not the same person we were 10 years ago, neurologically or existentially. The brain is a river, never stepping into itself the same way twice. And yet, amidst all change, there is continuity. A sense of self persists, not as a fixed point, but as a thread weaving through memory, perception, and projection. This self is the brain's most elaborate construction. It emerges early, stabilizes in adolescence, and reframes itself across the lifespan. It is not one voice, but a chorus. And when in balance, it sings. In its song are questions the brain cannot fully answer. Who am I? What is consciousness? What is the soul? These questions are not outside science, they are its frontier. The brain can model galaxies, decode DNA, invent civilizations, but it cannot yet grasp itself entirely. Perhaps that is its final gift, to know almost everything and still be filled with wonder. The human brain's capacity for adaptation, known as neuroplasticity, stands as one of its most remarkable features. From the moment we are born, the brain continuously molds itself in response to experiences, environments, and learning. This plasticity means that the brain is not a static organ confined by genetics alone. Rather, it is a dynamic entity capable of rewiring, reshaping, and renewing itself throughout life. It is the foundation of learning, memory, recovery from injury, and even emotional growth. At the cellular level, neuroplasticity involves changes in synaptic strength, the growth of new dendrites, and the formation of new synaptic connections. The brain's neurons communicate at synapses, where electrical impulses trigger the release of neurotransmitters. Repeated activation of certain pathways strengthens these synapses, a phenomenon called long-term potentiation. Conversely, unused, synapses may weaken and eventually disappear, a process called synaptic pruning. This selective sculpting ensures efficiency and precision in brain circuits. Early childhood is a critical period of heightened plasticity. During this time, experiences profoundly influence neural development, shaping everything from sensory perception to language acquisition. For example, infants raised in enriched environments with diverse stimuli often develop stronger cognitive skills and emotional regulation than those deprived of such stimulation. Yet the brain retains plasticity well beyond childhood. Even adult brains can grow new neurons, a process called neurogenesis, primarily in the hippocampus, the seat of memory and spatial navigation. Neuroplasticity underlies the brain's ability to recover from injuries such as strokes or trauma. When a region is damaged, neighboring areas or even the opposite hemisphere can sometimes take over lost functions, especially when rehabilitation involves targeted exercises and therapies. This remarkable capacity for reorganization challenges the outdated notion that the adult brain is fixed and unchangeable. Beyond recovery, neuroplasticity plays a vital role in emotional health. Mental practices such as meditation, mindfulness, and cognitive behavioral therapy have been shown to rewire the brain's circuits, reducing stress, anxiety, and depression. Functional MRI studies reveal that regular meditation thickens the prefrontal cortex, enhances connectivity in the default mode network, and calms the amygdala's hyperactivity. These changes improve emotional regulation, attention, and resilience. The plastic brain is also vulnerable. Chronic stress floods the system with cortisol, a hormone that, in excess, damages the hippocampus and impairs memory. Trauma can ingrain maladaptive patterns, increasing amygdala reactivity and shrinking areas responsible for executive control. Addiction hijacks the reward circuitry, rewiring the brain to prioritize substance over survival. In these cases, plasticity perpetuates pathology but also offers hope. With the right interventions, the brain can rewire again toward healing. Learning is at the heart of the brain's adaptive nature. From mastering a musical instrument to acquiring a new language, learning requires repeated practice, attention, and emotional engagement. The brain prioritizes salient, novel, and meaningful information, often facilitated by dopamine release, which signals reward and motivation. Sleep consolidates learning by replaying neural patterns formed during wakefulness, embedding them into long-term memory stores. Interestingly, learning is more efficient when multisensory. Combining visual, auditory, tactile, and kinesthetic inputs creates richer neural networks. This is why hands-on experience, storytelling, and social interaction enhance education beyond rote memorization. The brain thrives in environments that challenge, stimulate, and inspire. Creativity, closely linked to learning, emerges from the brain's ability to connect disparate ideas and generate novel solutions. The default mode network, active during daydreaming and introspection, collaborates with the executive control network, responsible for focused attention, to foster creative insight. This interplay allows the brain to explore possibilities unconstrained by immediate reality, giving birth to art, science, and innovation. However, creativity can be stifled by stress, fatigue, or rigid thinking. Practices that promote mental flexibility, such as mindfulness, play, and exposure to diverse perspectives, help maintain the brain's creative potential. Moreover, physical exercise increases blood flow and neurotrophic factors that nourish brain cells, indirectly supporting creativity and cognition. Another fascinating aspect of brain function is the regulation of sleep and circadian rhythms. The brain's suprachiasmatic nucleus in the hypothalamus acts as the master clock, synchronizing bodily functions with the 24-hour day-night cycle. Light sensed by the retina signals this clock, which in turn controls hormone release, body temperature, and alertness levels. Disruption of these rhythms, as seen in shift work or jet lag, impairs cognition, mood, and health. Sleep itself is a complex, active process essential for brain health. It consists of cycles between rapid eye movement, REM, and non-REM stages, each with unique functions. Non-REM sleep facilitates physical restoration and memory consolidation, while REM sleep supports emotional regulation and creative problem-solving. During deep sleep, the brain's glymphatic system clears metabolic waste, reducing the risk of neurodegenerative diseases. Inadequate sleep disrupts these processes, leading to impaired attention, learning difficulties, mood disorders, and increased vulnerability to illness. Chronic sleep deprivation shrinks the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus, exacerbating cognitive decline. Conversely, consistent restorative sleep promotes neuroplasticity, emotional stability, and overall well-being. Emotions themselves are deeply rooted in the brain's architecture. They arise from the limbic system, a collection of structures including the amygdala, hippocampus, hypothalamus, and cingulate cortex. The amygdala, often called the brain's alarm system, detects threats and generates fear and anxiety. The hippocampus contextualizes emotions by linking them to memories. The hypothalamus regulates bodily responses such as heart rate and hormonal shifts. Together, these systems orchestrate the physiological and psychological aspects of feelings. Emotions influence cognition profoundly. Positive emotions broaden attention and encourage flexible thinking, while negative emotions can narrow focus and prioritize survival. Emotional intelligence, the ability to perceive, understand, and manage emotions, depends on the interplay between limbic regions and the prefrontal cortex. High emotional intelligence correlates with better mental health, relationships, and decision-making. Social emotions such as empathy, shame, pride, and guilt require advanced neural networks integrating theory of mind and self-awareness. The temporoparietal junction, medial prefrontal cortex, and anterior cingulate cortex support these capacities, enabling us to navigate complex social landscapes. These abilities underscore that humans are inherently social creatures, wired to connect and cooperate. Language is another crowning achievement of the brain. Left hemisphere regions, including Broca's and Wernicke's areas, are central to speech production and comprehension. The arcuate fasciculus connects these areas, facilitating rapid communication between understanding and expression. Language acquisition involves not just these specialized centers, but also auditory processing, memory, motor control, and social interaction. Remarkably, the brain's plasticity allows language learning at any age, though critical periods in early childhood make acquisition more effortless. Bilingualism enhances cognitive flexibility, executive function, and may delay dementia onset. Language shapes thought, culture, and identity. It is both a tool and a lens through which we experience reality. Finally, the brain's interaction with technology is transforming how we think, learn, and remember. Digital devices extend our cognitive reach, providing external memory, calculation, and communication. However, constant multitasking, notifications, and screen time can fragment attention and impair deep thinking. The challenge lies in harnessing technology to enhance rather than diminish brain function. The brain is a universe unto itself, infinitely complex, endlessly adaptive, and profoundly mysterious. Understanding how it works is not just an academic endeavor. It is a journey into what makes us human. Our memories, dreams, emotions, creativity, and connections all arise from this 3-pound organ encased in bone, pulsing with electrical symphonies and chemical dances. In exploring the brain, we glimpse the essence of ourselves. We find resilience amid fragility, order amid chaos, and hope amid uncertainty. The brain teaches us that to know oneself is the greatest adventure of all. The human brain's intricate wiring forms the foundation for our conscious experience, yet much of its processing occurs beneath awareness. This unconscious activity governs automatic functions, intuition, and much of our daily behavior. While we often focus on deliberate thought and decision-making, the brain's subconscious machinery is vast, powerful, and essential. The brainstem and basal ganglia regulate vital bodily functions such as heart rate, breathing, and motor control without requiring conscious input. These areas ensure survival by managing reflexes and routine behaviors. For example, walking or driving a familiar route becomes automatic, freeing cognitive resources for complex tasks. The subconscious mind also influences perception. Sensory information floods in constantly, but the brain filters and prioritizes stimuli based on relevance, emotion, and prior experience. This filtering happens mostly outside conscious awareness, allowing us to focus on what matters. Subliminal cues can affect mood and choices subtly, demonstrating the depth of unconscious influence. Decision-making is a blend of conscious deliberation and subconscious intuition. Neuroscience reveals that many choices are initiated unconsciously before reaching conscious awareness. The ventromedial prefrontal cortex integrates emotional and rational inputs to guide judgments. This system balances logic with feelings, helping us navigate uncertainty and complexity. Memory, too, spans conscious and unconscious realms. Explicit memory stores facts and events we can recall intentionally, relying on the hippocampus and surrounding temporal lobes. Implicit memory includes skills, habits, and conditioned responses that operate beneath awareness, supported by the cerebellum and basal ganglia. These forms of memory allow us to perform tasks without thinking about each step, such as typing or riding a bike. The brain's default mode network, DMN, activates during rest and mind wandering. This network supports self-reflection, autobiographical memory, and envisioning the future. While seemingly idle, the DMN plays a critical role in creativity, problem-solving, and mental health. Dysfunction in this network associates with disorders like depression and schizophrenia, highlighting its importance. Sleep further illustrates unconscious brain activity's complexity. During various sleep stages, the brain processes emotional memories, consolidates learning, and detoxifies waste. Dreams emerge from spontaneous neural firing, often weaving fragments of experience into symbolic narratives. Though mysterious, Dreaming may help integrate emotions and foster insight. The brain's capacity for automaticity also underpins skill mastery. Through repetition, tasks shift from conscious effort to effortless execution. This transition reflects synaptic strengthening and circuit refinement, optimizing performance. Experts in sports, music, and other fields demonstrate this seamless blend of conscious intention and unconscious execution. Emotion regulation involves both conscious strategies and subconscious modulation. The prefrontal cortex exerts top-down control, dampening amygdala reactivity when appropriate. Yet, unconscious biases and past experiences shape emotional responses in subtle ways. Therapeutic approaches aim to bring unconscious patterns into awareness, enabling healthier regulation. Social cognition illustrates the interplay of conscious and unconscious processes. We often interpret others' emotions and intentions intuitively, relying on mirror neuron systems and rapid pattern recognition. These abilities foster empathy and cooperation, but can also lead to snap judgments or biases. Language processing also involves unconscious elements. While grammar and vocabulary require conscious learning, fluency depends on automatic retrieval and pattern recognition. The brain predicts words and meanings contextually, enabling smooth communication. This predictive capacity extends to other cognitive domains as well. The unconscious mind stores deeply ingrained habits and conditioned responses which can be challenging to change. Addiction exemplifies this, as reward circuits reinforce behaviors outside conscious control. Breaking such cycles requires conscious effort, awareness, and often external support. Mindfulness practices seek to bridge conscious and unconscious processes by cultivating present moment awareness and reducing automatic reactivity. Neuroscientific studies show mindfulness alters brain activity, enhancing connectivity between prefrontal regions and emotional centers. This fosters greater self-regulation and resilience. The brain's unconscious processing contributes to creativity and insight. Sudden aha moments often arise after periods of incubation when conscious focus relaxes. The brain continues working in the background, reorganizing information and spotting novel connections. Understanding the unconscious brain challenges traditional notions of free will and conscious control. It invites us to consider the complexity of human behavior, motivation, and identity. Far from being a single unified self, the brain operates as a network of interacting systems, some accessible to awareness, others hidden beneath. This perspective encourages humility and curiosity. By exploring unconscious processes, we gain tools for self-understanding, personal growth, and mental health. We learn to recognize automatic patterns, biases, and emotional triggers, enabling more intentional living. In sum, the unconscious brain is not a mysterious other, but an integral part of who we are. It supports survival, learning, emotion, and social connection in ways both subtle and profound. Embracing this complexity enriches our appreciation of the human mind and its limitless potential. The human brain's relationship with memory is profound and multifaceted, forming the essence of our identity and learning capacity. Memory is not a singular faculty, but a collection of systems that encode, store, and retrieve different types of information. Understanding these memory systems illuminates how we construct our personal narratives and adapt to the world. Declarative memory, also known as explicit memory, encompasses facts, events, and experiences we consciously recall. It splits into episodic memory, personal experiences situated in time and place, and semantic memory, which holds general knowledge independent of context. The hippocampus and surrounding medial temporal lobe structures are essential for forming new declarative memories, while storage occurs throughout the cerebral cortex. Non-declarative memory, or implicit memory, operates beneath awareness and includes skills, habits, conditioned responses, and priming effects. The basal ganglia, cerebellum, and motor cortex contribute to procedural memory, enabling us to perform complex tasks without conscious effort. For example, Typing on a keyboard or riding a bike relies on these implicit systems. Memory formation begins with encoding, where sensory input is transformed into a neural representation. Attention and emotional significance enhance encoding, increasing the likelihood of retention. The amygdala, involved in emotional processing, modulates hippocampal activity, strengthening memories tied to strong feelings. After encoding, memories undergo consolidation, a process by which fragile traces become stable and integrated into long-term storage. This occurs over hours to days and is facilitated by sleep, particularly slow-wave and REM stages. During sleep, the hippocampus replays neural patterns associated with recent experiences, reinforcing connections in the cortex. Retrieval is the process of accessing stored memories, which can be influenced by cues, context, and emotional states. Retrieval is not a perfect replay but a reconstructive act, prone to errors and distortions. Memories may be altered each time they are recalled, blending past and present information. The brain's plasticity allows memories to be updated, enabling adaptation but also vulnerability to misinformation. This dynamic nature has implications for eyewitness testimony, therapy, and learning. Techniques like spaced repetition and elaboration leverage this plasticity to improve memory retention. Working memory, a short-term system, holds and manipulates information temporarily for cognitive tasks like reasoning, comprehension, and problem-solving. The prefrontal cortex plays a critical role in maintaining and updating working memory, supporting attention and executive functions. Age-related memory decline affects many individuals, with episodic memory typically more vulnerable than semantic or procedural memory. Neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's cause progressive memory loss by damaging hippocampal and cortical regions. However, lifestyle factors, exercise, cognitive stimulation, social engagement can mitigate decline and promote brain health. Memory also underpins imagination and future planning. The brain uses past experiences to simulate possible futures, enabling decision-making and goal-setting. This constructive function involves the hippocampus, prefrontal cortex, and default mode network. Deficits in these networks can impair foresight and adaptability. Emotional memories, especially traumatic ones, can be persistent and intrusive, impacting mental health. Therapies like exposure therapy and EMDR aim to reprocess and integrate these memories to reduce distress. Understanding the neural basis of emotional memory informs treatments for PTSD and anxiety disorders. The interplay between memory and identity is central to human experience. Our sense of self emerges from the continuity of memories, linking past, present, and anticipated future. Disruptions in memory, as in amnesia, can profoundly alter identity and awareness. In addition to individual memory, collective memory shapes cultures and societies, transmitted through language, rituals, and storytelling. The brain's social networks facilitate empathy and shared understanding, reinforcing communal bonds. The complexity of memory reflects the brain's remarkable capacity to encode the richness of experience. It enables learning, creativity, emotional depth, and social connection. Exploring memory systems reveals not only how we remember, but who we are. The brain's incredible capacity for learning and adaptation stems from its plasticity, the ability to reorganize and form new neural connections throughout life. Neuroplasticity underlies everything from recovering after injury to acquiring new skills and reshaping thought patterns. This dynamic quality is fundamental to how the brain works. At the cellular level, plasticity involves changes in synapses, the connections between neurons. Synaptic strength can increase or decrease in response to activity, a process known as synaptic plasticity. Long-term potentiation, LTP, strengthens synapses, enhancing communication between neurons and forming the basis of learning and memory. Conversely, long-term depression, LTD, weakens synaptic connections, allowing for the pruning of unused pathways. Experience shapes the brain's wiring continually. From infancy, sensory input and interaction with the environment guide neural development. Sensitive periods, windows of heightened plasticity, are crucial for acquiring language, vision, and motor skills. During these times, the brain is especially responsive to experience, shaping lifelong abilities. Learning new skills, whether physical, cognitive, or emotional, engages plasticity mechanisms. Repetition strengthens relevant pathways, while feedback and practice refine circuits. For example, musicians' brains show enhanced connectivity in areas controlling fine motor skills and auditory processing. Similarly, language learners develop new networks for comprehension and production. Plasticity is not uniform across the brain. Some regions like the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex exhibit high plasticity throughout life, supporting memory and executive function. Others, such as primary sensory areas, become less flexible after development, but retain some capacity for change. The brain's ability to reorganize extends to recovery after injury. Following stroke or trauma, surviving neurons can form new connections to compensate for lost functions. Rehabilitation therapies harness this capacity, using targeted exercises to promote reorganization and regain abilities. Emotional and psychological plasticity is equally important. Cognitive behavioral therapy and mindfulness practices facilitate changes in thought patterns and emotional responses by modifying neural circuits. This adaptability enables overcoming maladaptive habits and fostering resilience. Environmental factors profoundly influence plasticity. Enriched environments with social interaction, novel experiences, and physical activity enhance neural growth and connectivity. Conversely, stress, isolation, and deprivation impair plasticity, affecting cognitive and emotional health. The adult brain's neurogenesis, the birth of new neurons, occurs primarily in the hippocampus, supporting memory and mood regulation. While limited compared to early development, this ongoing neuron production contributes to adaptability and recovery. Neuroplasticity also underlies creativity and problem-solving. The brain's ability to form novel connections allows for flexible thinking, insight, and innovation. This capacity can be cultivated through learning, exploration, and open-mindedness. However, plasticity has limits and vulnerabilities. Excessive or maladaptive rewiring can contribute to disorders such as addiction, chronic pain, and certain psychiatric conditions. Understanding these processes guides interventions to promote healthy plasticity and mitigate pathology. Technology and neurostimulation offer emerging avenues to enhance plasticity. Techniques like transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS, and neurofeedback show promise in treating depression, stroke, and cognitive decline. By modulating neural activity and promoting beneficial plastic changes. Ultimately, the brain's plasticity exemplifies its remarkable capacity to adapt, learn, and grow. This dynamic nature allows us to navigate an ever-changing world, heal from adversity, and expand our potential across the lifespan. Embracing. The brain's plastic power invites continual growth and transformation. The human brain's electrical activity underlies every thought, sensation, and movement we experience. Neurons communicate through electrical impulses, creating complex patterns of brain waves that reflect different mental states and functions. Understanding these neural oscillations reveals how the brain coordinates its vast networks. Brain waves are rhythmic fluctuations in electrical activity, measured by electroencephalography, EEG. They vary in frequency and amplitude, categorized into distinct bands: delta, theta, alpha, beta, and gamma. Each band corresponds to particular cognitive and behavioral states. Delta waves, the slowest, 0.5 to 4 Hz, dominate during deep restorative sleep. This stage supports physical recovery, memory consolidation, and brain detoxification. Delta activity reflects large-scale synchronization across brain regions, essential for healing and resetting neural circuits. Theta waves, 4-8 Hz, emerge during light sleep, drowsiness, and meditative states. They associate with creativity, intuition, and emotional processing. Theta rhythms facilitate communication between the hippocampus and cortex, aiding memory encoding and retrieval. Alpha waves 8-12 Hz occur during relaxed wakefulness, especially with closed eyes. They signify a calm, alert state, promoting mental coordination and sensory inhibition. Alpha oscillations help filter distractions, supporting focused attention and restful awareness. Beta waves, 12-30 Hz, dominate during active thinking, problem-solving, and focused mental effort. Increased beta activity accompanies alertness, concentration, and decision-making. Excessive beta may relate to anxiety or hyperarousal, reflecting heightened neural excitability. Gamma waves, 30-100 Hz. The fastest oscillations relate to high-level cognitive functions such as perception, consciousness, and information integration. Gamma synchrony binds disparate neural processes into coherent experiences, underpinning awareness and complex cognition. These brain waves do not operate in isolation, but interact dynamically. Cross-frequency coupling allows different rhythms to coordinate, orchestrating neural communication across time and space. This coordination supports memory, attention, and sensory processing. Neural oscillations facilitate the brain's ability to segregate and integrate information. By synchronizing activity within and between regions, brain waves enable efficient processing and reduce interference. This rhythmic organization is fundamental to cognition. Abnormal brainwave patterns are linked to neurological and psychiatric disorders. For example, excessive slow-wave activity may appear in coma or brain injury, while disrupted gamma oscillations associate with schizophrenia and autism. EEG biomarkers guide diagnosis and treatment monitoring. Technological advances enable modulation of brain waves through neurofeedback and non-invasive brain stimulation. These approaches aim to restore healthy oscillatory patterns, improving attention, mood, and cognitive performance. Sleep research highlights the role of brain waves in memory consolidation. During slow-wave sleep, delta rhythms promote hippocampal cortical dialogue, strengthening learned information. REM sleep, rich in theta and beta activity, supports emotional memory processing and creativity. The balance and flexibility of brain rhythms reflect neural health and adaptability. Efficient switching between states underlies fluid thinking, emotional regulation, and behavioral flexibility. Disorders often involve impaired modulation of these rhythms. Meditation and mindfulness practices influence brainwaves, increasing alpha and theta activity, inducing relaxation and enhancing awareness. These practices harness the brain's rhythmic nature to promote well-being. In sum, electrical brain activity provides the temporal structure for neural processing. Brainwaves shape how neurons communicate, enabling perception, thought, and consciousness. Exploring these rhythms deepens our understanding of the living brain's elegant complexity. The brain's chemical environment is essential for its function, relying on a complex interplay of neurotransmitters and neuromodulators to regulate communication between neurons. These chemical messengers influence mood, cognition, motivation, and behavior, shaping every aspect of our mental life. Neurotransmitters are molecules released by neurons to transmit signals across synapses, the tiny gaps between cells. When an electrical impulse reaches the axon terminal, neurotransmitters are released into the synaptic cleft, binding to receptors on the receiving neuron. This process can either excite or inhibit the postsynaptic neuron, influencing its likelihood of firing. Key neurotransmitters include glutamate, the primary excitatory chemical, and gamma-aminobutyric acid, GABA, the main inhibitory neurotransmitter. Glutamate promotes neural activation and plasticity, essential for learning and memory. GABA counterbalances excitation, maintaining stability and preventing overstimulation. Dopamine plays a pivotal role in reward, motivation, and movement. It reinforces behaviors linked to pleasure and goal attainment, influencing addiction and mood disorders. Dopaminergic pathways connect brain regions such as the substantia nigra and ventral tegmental area to the prefrontal cortex and limbic system. Serotonin regulates mood, sleep, appetite, and cognition. It is involved in emotional balance and stress resilience. Altered serotonin levels contribute to depression and anxiety, making it a target for many antidepressant medications. Norepinephrine, also known as noradrenaline, modulates arousal, attention, and the fight-or-flight response. It prepares the brain and body to respond to stress or danger by increasing alertness and energy. Acetylcholine supports attention, learning, and memory. It facilitates communication between the brain and muscles and is involved in wakefulness and a REM sleep. Degeneration of cholinergic neurons is a hallmark of Alzheimer's disease. Neuropeptides, such as endorphins and oxytocin, modulate mood and social behavior. Endorphins act as natural painkillers and promote feelings of well-being. Oxytocin fosters bonding and trust, often called the love hormone. Neuromodulators differ from classical neurotransmitters in that they affect broader neural networks rather than specific synapses. They adjust the overall excitability and plasticity of neurons, shaping brain states and responses. The balance and interaction of these chemicals are crucial for healthy brain function. Dysregulation can lead to neurological and psychiatric disorders. For instance, imbalances in dopamine and serotonin contribute to schizophrenia, depression, and bipolar disorder. Pharmacological treatments for mental health conditions often target neurotransmitter systems to restore balance. Antidepressants, antipsychotics, and anxiolytics modulate neurotransmission, alleviating symptoms and improving quality of life. The blood-brain barrier tightly regulates the brain's chemical environment, protecting it from toxins and maintaining homeostasis. This selective permeability poses challenges for delivering drugs to the brain, driving innovation in treatment methods. Recent research explores the gut-brain axis, revealing that gut microbiota influence neurotransmitter production and brain chemistry. This connection highlights the interplay between diet, digestion, and mental health. Neurotransmitter activity is also shaped by genetics and environment. Stress, trauma, and lifestyle affect chemical signaling, demonstrating the brain's sensitivity and adaptability. In conclusion, the brain's chemical messengers form the foundation of neural communication and mental function. Their delicate balance orchestrates the symphony of cognition, emotion, and behavior, illuminating the biochemical basis of the human experience. The brain's architecture is a masterpiece of biological engineering, with its intricate networks and specialized regions enabling diverse functions. Understanding the structural organization reveals how different areas collaborate to produce seamless cognition and behavior. At the largest scale, the brain divides into three main parts: the forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. The forebrain includes the cerebral cortex and subcortical structures, governing higher-order functions such as reasoning, language, and emotion. The midbrain serves as a relay and processing hub for sensory and motor information. The hindbrain controls vital functions like balance, breathing, and arousal. The cerebral cortex, the brain's outer layer, is highly folded, increasing surface area and computational power. It divides into 4 lobes: frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital. Each lobe specializes in certain functions but works integratively. The frontal lobe is the seat of executive functions, planning, decision-making, problem-solving, and voluntary movement. It houses the prefrontal cortex, crucial for working memory, attention, and personality. Damage to this area can impair judgment, impulse control, and social behavior. The parietal lobe processes sensory information related to touch, spatial, orientation, and body awareness. It integrates input from various modalities to create a coherent perception of the environment and our position within it. The temporal lobe is essential for auditory processing, language comprehension, and memory formation. The hippocampus, embedded within the medial temporal lobe, plays a vital role in encoding new memories and spatial navigation. The occipital lobe specializes in visual processing, interpreting light signals from the eyes into complex images. It analyzes aspects like color, shape, and motion, enabling visual perception. Beneath the cortex lie subcortical structures that regulate emotion, motivation, and autonomic functions. The limbic system, including the amygdala and hypothalamus, governs emotions, memory, and homeostasis. The basal ganglia coordinate movement and habit formation. The brainstem connects the brain to the spinal cord, controlling basic life functions, such as heart rate, respiration, and sleep-wake cycles. It acts as a conduit for sensory and motor signals between the body and brain. White matter consists of myelinated axons forming communication highways that link different brain regions. Efficient connectivity through these pathways is essential for integrated brain function. Disorders like multiple sclerosis disrupt white matter, impairing signaling. Neural circuits within and between regions underlie complex behaviors. Sensory pathways transmit external information to processing centers, while motor circuits initiate movement. Feedback loops enable adaptation and learning. Brain lateralization reflects functional asymmetry between hemispheres. For most people, the left hemisphere dominates language and analytical tasks, while the right excels in spatial and creative functions. This division enhances cognitive efficiency. Development shapes brain structure dramatically. Early in life, neurons proliferate, migrate, and form synapses rapidly. Over time, pruning refines connections, enhancing efficiency. Plasticity allows the adult brain to modify circuits in response to experience. Advances in neuroimaging, such as MRI and fMRI, reveal the living brain's structure and activity in unprecedented detail. These tools enhance understanding of normal function and disease, guiding diagnosis and treatment. Brain networks operate on multiple scales, from microcircuits to large-scale systems, enabling parallel and hierarchical processing. This organization supports the brain's remarkable computational abilities. In essence, the brain's structure provides the foundation for its function. Its elegant design integrates specialized regions and networks to generate the rich tapestry of human experience, cognition, and behavior. The process of memory formation is one of the most remarkable functions of the human brain, allowing us to store and recall experiences, knowledge, and skills. Memory is not a single entity, but consists of multiple systems working in concert, each with unique mechanisms and purposes. Memory begins with encoding, the initial perception and registration of information. Sensory input arrives through various modalities and is temporarily held in sensory memory, which preserves details for mere seconds. This fleeting store allows the brain to decide what information to attend to and process further. Short-term memory, or working memory, holds information actively for seconds to minutes. It enables reasoning, comprehension, and decision-making by maintaining relevant data accessible for manipulation. The prefrontal cortex plays a central role in working memory, coordinating the temporary storage and processing of information. For memories to last beyond the short term, they must be consolidated into long-term memory. This process involves transferring and stabilizing information within neural circuits, a function heavily dependent on the hippocampus. During consolidation, memories are gradually integrated into the cerebral cortex for permanent storage. Long-term memory divides into declarative, explicit, and non-declarative, implicit types. Declarative memory includes episodic memory, personal experiences and events, and semantic memory, encompassing facts and general knowledge. Implicit memory involves skills, habits, and conditioned responses, often operating below conscious awareness. The hippocampus acts as a critical hub for episodic memory, binding disparate sensory and contextual elements into coherent experiences. Damage to this area impairs the ability to form new episodic memories, a condition known as anterograde amnesia. Sleep plays a vital role in memory consolidation. During slow wave and REM sleep stages, the brain replays and reorganizes neural patterns associated with recent experiences, strengthening synaptic connections and integrating new information with existing knowledge. Neuroplasticity underpins learning and memory. with synaptic changes such as long-term potentiation enhancing. Communication between neurons. These modifications encode the information, making neural circuits more efficient and responsive. Emotions influence memory formation profoundly. The amygdala, the brain's emotional center, modulates hippocampal activity, strengthening memories tied to emotional significance. This interplay explains why emotionally charged events are often remembered vividly. Memory retrieval involves reactivating stored neural patterns. Successful recall depends on cues and context, with the brain reconstructing past experiences from distributed networks. Sometimes memories are prone to distortion or forgetting, reflecting the brain's reconstructive nature. Forgetting is not merely a failure, but an adaptive process. It prevents information overload, allowing the brain to prioritize relevant data and maintain cognitive flexibility. Mechanisms like synaptic weakening and neural pruning support this selective retention. Certain brain disorders affect memory, including Alzheimer's disease, characterized by progressive hippocampal degeneration and widespread cognitive decline. Understanding memory mechanisms guides interventions aiming to preserve and enhance cognitive function. Advances in neuroscience explore memory enhancement through pharmacology, brain stimulation, and cognitive training. These approaches aim to improve learning and counteract age-related decline. In summary, memory is a dynamic, multifaceted process central to identity and survival. The brain's intricate systems work together to encode, consolidate, and retrieve experiences, enabling us to learn from the past and navigate the future. Perception is the brain's remarkable ability to interpret sensory information and construct a coherent representation of the external world. This process transforms raw data from our senses into meaningful experiences, allowing us to navigate and interact with our environment. Sensory organs capture stimuli such as light, sound, touch, taste, and smell, converting them into electrical signals transmitted to the brain. Each sensory modality has specialized receptors tuned to detect specific features. Photoreceptors in the eyes respond to light. Mechanoreceptors in the skin detect pressure and vibration, and so forth. Once sensory input reaches the brain, it undergoes intricate processing in dedicated cortical areas. The primary sensory cortices, visual, auditory, somatosensory, olfactory, and gustatory, analyze basic features such as edges, frequencies, textures, and chemical compositions. However, perception extends beyond mere sensation. The brain integrates input across modalities, applying context, memory, and expectations to interpret ambiguous or incomplete information. This top-down processing shapes our subjective experience, demonstrating that perception is an active, constructive process. Visual perception exemplifies this complexity. The retina transduces light into neural signals, which travel via the optic nerve to the primary visual cortex in the occipital lobe. Here, neurons respond selectively to orientation, color, and motion. Subsequent processing streams, the dorsal and ventral pathways, analyze spatial relationships and object identity, respectively. Auditory perception involves the cochlea converting sound waves into neural impulses, which ascend through brainstem nuclei to the auditory cortex. The brain extracts features like pitch, loudness, and direction, enabling speech comprehension and music appreciation. Touch perception, mediated by receptors in the skin and deeper tissues, informs the brain about pressure, temperature, and pain. The somatosensory cortex maps the body's surface in a detailed homunculus, representing different body parts with proportional cortical space. Olfaction and gustation detect chemical molecules, linking closely to emotion and memory due to their neural pathways through the limbic system. These senses play crucial roles in survival, influencing behaviors related to food and danger. Perception is inherently adaptive and prone to illusions, reflecting the brain's interpretive strategies. Visual illusions reveal how the brain fills gaps, resolves ambiguity, and predicts outcomes based on prior knowledge. Attention is vital for perception. selectively enhancing processing of relevant stimuli while filtering distractions. Neural mechanisms of attention modulate activity in sensory cortices and higher-order areas, shaping awareness. Perceptual learning alters the brain's sensitivity through experience, improving discrimination and interpretation of sensory information. This plasticity underlies skills like reading, musical ability, and expert object recognition. Disorders of perception, such as agnosia or neglect, illustrate the brain's role in constructing reality. Damage to specific areas can disrupt the ability to recognize objects, faces, or spatial relationships despite intact sensory organs. Emerging technologies like brain-computer interfaces leverage understanding of perception to restore sensory functions and enable direct communication between brain and machines. In essence, perception is the gateway between the external world and our inner experience. The brain's sophisticated processing transforms sensory signals into the rich tapestry of reality we inhabit, blending sensation, cognition, and emotion into a seamless whole. Attention, the cognitive process that allows us to focus selectively on certain aspects of our environment while ignoring others, is fundamental to how the brain filters and processes information. Without attention, the immense flood of sensory data would overwhelm the mind, making it impossible to function effectively. Attention operates through multiple mechanisms, including selective attention, sustained attention, divided attention, and executive control. Selective attention allows the brain to prioritize specific stimuli, such as focusing on a conversation, amid background noise. Sustained attention maintains focus over extended periods, crucial for tasks requiring concentration. Divided attention manages multiple tasks simultaneously, though often with diminished efficiency. Executive control oversees these processes, managing priorities and switching focus when necessary. Neuroanatomically, attention involves a network of brain regions. The prefrontal cortex governs executive functions and top-down control, directing attention based on goals and expectations. The parietal cortex, particularly the posterior parietal area, manages spatial attention, orienting focus toward relevant locations. The thalamus acts as a relay and filter for sensory input, regulating information flow to the cortex. The neurotransmitter systems, including acetylcholine and norepinephrine, modulate attentional states, enhancing alertness and processing efficiency. Dysregulation of these systems contributes to attentional disorders such as ADHD. Attention also influences perception and memory. By enhancing neural responses to selected stimuli, attention increases the likelihood that information will be encoded into memory. It acts as a gatekeeper, determining what is prioritized for deeper cognitive processing. The brain's attentional system is dynamic and flexible, adapting to changing environments and internal states. For example, emotional salience can capture attention involuntarily, highlighting stimuli relevant for survival or well-being. Cognitive training and mindfulness practices can improve attentional control, strengthening the brain's ability to focus and resist distractions. These interventions demonstrate the brain's plasticity and capacity for self-regulation. However, attention has limitations. Multitasking often divides cognitive resources, reducing performance and increasing errors. The brain's attentional capacity is finite, requiring strategies to manage workload effectively. In addition to external attention, internal attention focuses on thoughts, memories, and planning. This introspective focus engages the default mode network, a brain system active during rest and self-referential thinking. Disruptions in attentional processes can profoundly impact daily life, affecting learning, work, and social interactions. Understanding the neural basis of attention informs treatments and technologies aimed at enhancing cognitive function. Ultimately, attention is the brain's spotlight, illuminating the vast landscape of sensory input and internal thoughts to create coherent, goal-directed experience. It is central to consciousness, shaping what we perceive, remember, and act. Language is one of the most extraordinary capacities of the human brain, enabling complex communication, abstract thought, and cultural transmission. The neural mechanisms underlying language involve specialized brain regions and intricate networks that work seamlessly to produce and comprehend spoken and written words. The left hemisphere of the brain, particularly in most right-handed individuals, predominantly supports language functions. Key areas include Broca's area, located in the frontal lobe, responsible for speech production and grammatical processing, and Wernicke's area in the temporal lobe, critical for language comprehension and semantic processing. Language begins with auditory or visual input, sounds or written symbols, that the brain decodes into meaningful units. In speech perception, the auditory cortex analyzes acoustic signals, which are then processed in higher-order language areas to identify phonemes, words and sentences. The production of language involves formulating ideas, selecting words, constructing grammar, and coordinating the motor actions required for speech or writing. Broca's area orchestrates these processes, integrating linguistic rules and motor planning. Damage to this area causes expressive aphasia, where speech is slow and effortful, but comprehension remains intact. Wernicke's area enables understanding of language meaning. Lesions here produce receptive aphasia, where speech remains fluent but is nonsensical, and comprehension is impaired. The arcuate fasciculus, a white matter tract, connects these two regions, facilitating communication between comprehension and production centers. Beyond these classical areas, modern research shows that language involves a broad network, including the right hemisphere for prosody and emotional tone, the basal ganglia for procedural learning of syntax, and the prefrontal cortex for discourse and pragmatics. Language acquisition in childhood reflects remarkable plasticity, as infants rapidly learn sounds, vocabulary, and grammar through exposure and interaction. Critical periods exist where the brain is especially receptive to language learning, underscoring the importance of early experience. Reading and writing recruit additional brain regions, such as the visual word form area, in the fusiform gyrus, which specializes in recognizing letter patterns and words. Literacy reshapes the brain's organization, illustrating the dynamic interplay between biology and culture. Multilingualism demonstrates the brain's flexibility, with overlapping and distinct neural circuits managing multiple languages. Bilingual individuals often show enhanced cognitive control due to the demands of switching between linguistic systems. Language disorders, including aphasia, dyslexia, and speech apraxia, provide insights into the neural basis of language. Rehabilitation approaches leverage neuroplasticity to recover or compensate for impaired functions. The evolution of language remains a profound mystery, but its neural substrates highlight the brain's extraordinary capacity for symbolic thought and social connection. Language shapes our identity, culture, and understanding of the world, making it a cornerstone of human experience. In essence, the brain's language systems exemplify the fusion of biological specialization and experiential learning, enabling us to share ideas, emotions, and knowledge across generations. Consciousness, the enigmatic experience of awareness and self-reflection, stands as one of the greatest mysteries of the human brain. It encompasses the subjective sensation of being, the capacity to experience thoughts and emotions, and the ability to perceive the world and oneself within it. Neuroscientists approach consciousness by studying the neural correlates, the specific brain activities and structures associated with conscious experience. The cerebral cortex, particularly the prefrontal cortex, is crucial for higher-order awareness, integrating sensory information and enabling reflection and planning. The thalamus serves as a central relay, modulating signals between sensory areas, and the cortex, supporting the unified experience of consciousness. The brainstem also contributes to arousal and wakefulness, foundational states for conscious awareness. Consciousness is not a singular phenomenon but consists of multiple components, including wakefulness, attention, and awareness. Wakefulness is the basic state of being alert, while awareness involves the contents of consciousness, what we perceive, think, and feel. Research using neuroimaging reveals that conscious perception depends on widespread, coordinated brain activity, forming dynamic networks that integrate information across regions. The global workspace theory proposes that consciousness arises when information is broadcast widely to multiple cognitive systems. Altered states of consciousness such as sleep, anesthesia, meditation, and certain neurological disorders provide insight into its mechanisms. During deep sleep or anesthesia, brain connectivity and activity patterns shift, reducing conscious awareness. Phenomena like blind sight and locked-in syndrome show that some unconscious processes continue without conscious experience, suggesting that much brain activity operates beneath awareness. Philosophical questions about consciousness, its origin, nature, and whether it can be fully explained by physical processes remain open. The hard problem of consciousness addresses why and how subjective experience arises from neural activity. Advances in brain science hold promise for better understanding consciousness and its disorders, including coma, vegetative states, and minimally conscious states. Ethical considerations emerge around these insights, impacting medical decision-making. Consciousness shapes human identity, creativity, morality, and the sense of self. It allows us to experience time, form memories, anticipate the future, and empathize with others. The brain's ability to generate conscious experience from complex interactions of neurons remains a testament to nature's ingenuity. Though much remains to be discovered, exploring consciousness continues to illuminate the profound depths of the human mind. In conclusion, consciousness is the pinnacle of brain function, a rich, dynamic phenomenon that defines our existence and connects us to the vast mystery of life itself.